bumps grew so large, like I was growing another head on top of my head. It hurt like crazy.
The only thing I could think was, I'm losing my vision and I'm never going to see my child.
I thought she would not live very long, and it scared me to death.
Next, two medical mysteries that defied the experts. When star athlete Lonnie White develops strange, painful bumps on his scalp, he has no idea that over the next 2 decades, his body will transform in ways no one could ever have imagined.
I look like an elephant man. I could see how people commit suicide from stuff like this.
Then, when Theresa Rachlin experiences bizarre distortions in her eyesight, each day becomes a frightening struggle.
It looked like I was looking through a kaleidoscope. I was terrified.
In the fall of 1986, Lonnie White, a star athlete at the University of Southern California, was looking forward to a big NFL career.
I had set a record at USC for the most kickoff return yards in a season. I was really anticipating an opportunity to play in the NFL. Unfortunately, I wasn't drafted. So I signed as a free agent in the NFL, and I was able to make the team as a wide receiver and kickoff return specialist.
Basically, you go to camp just like everybody else trying to make the 48-man roster.
And in June of 1987, Lonnie starts training with a professional football team.
I was so excited about going out to practice every day.
While the competition for a spot on the team is fierce, Lonnie is confident he'll make it.
They test your mind, your body, and your spirit. I consider myself the A1 state of health. I was able to run a 40-yard dash in 4.4 seconds.
But a few weeks into training, just as Lonnie's hitting his stride, he notices something very strange.
I woke up one morning and I realized that I had bumps on my head. They were huge. They were so painful, just on the touch.
He was standing at the mirror and I noticed some bumps on his scalp. I didn't think that it was serious, and we kidded each other about any and everything. I started calling him Lumpy.
It was a nickname that at first I laughed at. I wasn't that concerned until I was in the field. When I put the helmet on, it hurt so bad. You talk about pain. Oh, God. It hurt like crazy. I didn't want the coaches to know, just give them a reason just to cut me. So I would go to great lengths to hide this problem.
And although Lonnie thinks he can handle the problem on his own, every tackle sends him into agonizing pain.
I could take getting hit by a football guy. The pain, oh, it was just terrible.
Determined to tough it out, Lonnie refuses to let anything stop him from playing pro football. But then, fate intervenes.
Quarterback threw the ball up, and Lonnie made the catch, but took a very vicious hit to the shoulder.
All I saw was a bright white light. I dislocated my shoulder, and it turned out that was the end of my football career. No more football for me. That was it. After spending all these years working hard, and then to know that your career is over, it was tough. It was the worst feeling.
While he's completely disillusioned by the turn of events, Lonnie now has nothing to lose and schedules an appointment with a local general practitioner.
And the doctor took a look at the bumps right away. He thought I had folliculitis.
Folliculitis is a skin condition in which hair follicles become infected with strep bacteria. The resulting inflammation around the hair follicle can lead to the formation of an abscess or boil.
The doctor said he was going to lance the biggest bump, the draining. It really surprised me how much blood and pus came out. The smell was like sitting in the middle of a sewage dump. And I was so embarrassed. But I felt a relief right away. He told me, oh, don't worry about it. The smell is from the infection. The doctor prescribed for me this powerful antibiotic. I was really optimistic about having this problem solved.
Lonnie heads back to Los Angeles. And over the next 3 months, he focuses on starting a new career as a sports writer.
I was hired by a major newspaper in Los Angeles. I felt blessed.
But it's not long before he notices new growths developing, and they're bigger and more painful than ever.
The bumps grew so large, it was like I was growing another head on top of my head. I realized that it wasn't just folliculitis. Even though I had taken antibiotics, it wasn't helping me. Every time one would go away, a new one would pop up. And the big bumps would open up. I had pus all over my scalp. Oh, God, I was so embarrassed about that. All the other reporters that worked at the newspaper would be looking at my scalp. So I decided to go see a new dermatologist. The dermatologist examined my scalp and said my skin was inflamed. He was concerned about why my body wasn't responding to antibiotics, even though I had signs of infection. So that worried me.
Hoping to pinpoint what kind of infection Lonnie might have, the doctor runs a battery of tests and even performs a biopsy.
But the results came back negative. It just added to the frustration I was going through.
Baffled, the dermatologist can only conclude that Lonnie has ingrown hairs and prescribes a medicated shampoo to relieve the inflammation.
I was very skeptical that this was going to work. I took a shower and I washed my hair and it tingled. And so that feeling gave me hope. By the second week, I didn't have any new flare-ups. And so I was very excited about my future.
Finally, Lonnie's life is back on track. He begins to make a name for himself as a sports writer over the next few years. And he even starts getting calls to appear on the local TV station as a commentator.
He covered a vast array of sports teams in the LA area, so it looked like his career was taking off.
I felt that things were coming together for me.
And in 1994, just when Lonnie thinks his life can't get any better, he meets the woman of his dreams at a New Year's Eve party in New York City.
When she looked at me and I looked at her, we both smiled. We hit it off right away.
When I first met Lonnie, he was very easygoing and easy to talk to.
She was just so compassionate about life and people.
Initially, Lonnie was busy traveling. I worked for a sportswear manufacturer based in Manhattan.
We had a long-distance relationship. And as we got to know each other, I really fell deeper and deeper in love with her. And I felt that this skin issue was behind me.
But just as Lonnie begins to believe the vile growths are a thing of the past, a frightening new development suddenly emerges.
One day I looked in the mirror, I noticed a bump on my cheek. And I thought it was just acne and would go away. And then within a few weeks, it went from the size of a penny to the size of a golf ball. And I was so embarrassed. I was scared to see how serious the problem was. I needed help.
Seven years ago, sports reporter Lonnie White was plagued with massive, excruciatingly painful boils on his scalp that mysteriously went away. But to his horror, they've suddenly returned, this time on his face. The growths have become so unsightly, he's forced to turn down on-camera assignments.
I looked really, really bad. As time wore on, I realized I wasn't being called for television appearances as often.
Desperate for help, Lonnie checks in with a new doctor.
The dermatologist looked at it and touched it and told me I had cystic acne.
Cystic acne is a severe skin disorder in which abscesses form when oil ducts become clogged and infected.
He numbed it up, lanced it, and the pus and the blood just came pouring out of my face. The doctor prescribed for me this powerful acne medicine that was supposed to dry up my skin so it won't be inflamed. I took the medication, but within the first week, I felt like a reptile. My skin was so dry and painful.
Not only does the prescription fail to work, but a second bump begins to grow on Lonnie's face, and new boils start to appear on his scalp.
It was a nightmare. You talk about frustrating. I was in tears. It was obvious that all my television opportunities had dried up. I felt that I was being punished for something I didn't even have any control over.
Lonnie got very withdrawn. I didn't understand.
I started avoiding people as much as possible. I did my best to keep my skin problems away from Kim, avoiding her when I had a flare-up on my face.
At that time, I was in New York. I had no clue of what he was going through.
After hiding his secret from Kimberly for 2 years, Lonnie reaches a breaking point and opens up about his horrible condition.
I told her about my skin problem, and she was very supportive.
When I realized the extent of his suffering, it was incredibly overwhelming.
We came to some conclusion that she was going to move out to Los Angeles, and I was so happy.
While Lonnie is thrilled to have Kimberly by his side, he's totally unprepared for the disturbing turn his health is about to take.
I told Kimberly that something's not feeling right under my arm. And then she looked at it. Her face told the story. It was one of those moments that you just realize that whatever you hope for isn't gonna come true.
He developed them under his armpits and then in his groin area. When the boils would erupt, they would just ooze pus. I was in disbelief.
Unnerved by the state Lonnie is in, Kimberly encourages him to meet with a new round of specialists.
I went to doctor after doctor, but no one could give me answers. It was very frustrating and taxing. These monstrous things, they hurt, they were ugly, and they smelled. You can't help but wonder, why am I the person suffering from this?
There were moments where we were both sort of depressed and overwhelmed. He definitely became more inactive. He stopped playing basketball.
I just became less and less of the person I used to be and more of a person just trying to survive. I always had a spare 2 or 3 changes of clothing because you never know when you'll have a flare-up and it might stain your clothing. I just wanted to get through the day and just finish my job. And I wasn't even embarrassed anymore. It became a way of life.
As the years go by, Lonnie's mysterious disease ultimately leaves his skin permanently damaged.
I had so many lancings on my face that scar tissue began to develop. And once you get scar tissue, it just becomes like just dead flesh, and that's what was laying on my skin. I looked like an elephant man. I could see how people commit suicide for stuff like this because it just takes your life out of you. Every day I would pray to find some kind of solution for this problem.
Finally, nearly 2 decades since the devastating skin condition first set in, Lonnie's prayers are answered. In the summer of 2005, he tracks down a new doctor who specializes in rare skin disorders, and his gut tells him to set up an appointment right away.
I was on the internet, and Dr. Jaffer was a name that just kept coming up.
On a warm day in June, Lonnie meets the man he hopes will be able to explain his mysterious disease.
He was in a lot of distress and was very affected by his condition, and it clearly had a profound impact on his life. Lonnie presented with about 25 bumps and nodules in the inner thighs, the underarms, the scalp, as well as his face. I'd seen other patients with his condition before in varying amounts of severity.
Within 30 seconds, Dr. Jaffer immediately knew what my problem was. I was so happy.
For almost 18 years, Lonnie White has been suffering from painful, disfiguring boils on his head, face, and body. But now, one doctor thinks he knows what has turned Lonnie's life into a living nightmare.
I had seen so many doctors over the years, and they told me so many different stories. I just needed to get some sort of relief.
Lonnie's medical history, clinical presentation, and symptoms made it very clear that this was a diagnosis of hidradenitis suppurativa.
Hidradenitis suppurativa is a rare inflammatory skin disease. In healthy individuals, the body eliminates dead skin cells and excretes sweat through the hair follicles. But in patients like Lonnie, for some unknown reason, dead skin cells block the pores, trapping the material in the surrounding tissue and triggering severe inflammation.
Dead skin cells slough off our bodies out of our hair follicles. But when they don't get out of the hair follicles fast enough, we produce little bumps in our skin. In response, the body sends white blood cells to resolve the matter. And this results in big balls of pus. Pus is collections of white blood cells, which the only way to release them is by opening it up and letting it drain. Very severe inflammatory responses. The pus has a very strong odor. The boils and nodules of hidradenitis are exquisitely painful. As they fill up with pus and dead skin cells, they place a tremendous amount of pressure on the surrounding tissue. That pressure causes the nerves to fire off and cause pain. I think that the amount of pain he was experiencing was probably tremendous. The inflammation seems to turn into a snowball effect. It gets bigger and bigger and doesn't seem to stop.
Just to have a name for my condition was like scoring a touchdown. After all those years of being misdiagnosed, I was so happy because he gave me a sense of hope and optimism that I hadn't experienced in quite some time.
I felt relieved he found a doctor willing to get to the bottom of his illness.
And as Dr. Jaffer explains the disease, it becomes clear why not one of Lonnie's tests ever revealed an infection.
Boils are not made up of bacteria. In fact, they almost always turn out to be sterile because of the white blood cells.
However, every time the growths were lanced, the open wounds became highly susceptible to germs.
Worst case scenario is nodules become an opening for dangerous bacteria. And in the situation where somebody is not seeking treatment, that dangerous bacteria can become a very serious infection and can lead to death. Unfortunately, with hidradenitis suppurativa, ongoing research has not revealed a cure. Hidradenitis suppurativa has been known to resolve completely without treatment. There is always the possibility that it could flare up many years later. We really don't understand why it waxes and wanes and becomes better or worse.
While there are no proven treatments for HS, there are experimental therapies that can help minimize the disease.
We decided to use medications that try to treat the inflammation that recently have come onto the scene that we use for other inflammatory conditions like rheumatoid arthritis.
Being treated with a rheumatoid arthritis drug is somewhat out of the box when you're dealing with a skin issue like I have. And I was so excited about this opportunity.
When he started receiving the medications, I think instantly he felt a difference, and within about 6 weeks he was clearing up.
Unfortunately, the treatment's effect is only temporary. And to Lonnie's disappointment, the bumps return again and again.
He goes through cycles where things work and then they level off and become less effective.
He couldn't find anything out there that really will help him.
That certain parts of his hidradenitis have quieted down, his scalp is doing much better, but then there are other areas that continue to be involved, such as the underarms. Lonnie has to continue to be positive and attempt new treatments because there's always new things being developed.
While Lonnie continues to hope that one day they'll figure out how to manage his condition, he can't help but wonder why it took almost 2 decades to find a doctor who could identify the disease.
Hidradenitis suppurativa is an unusual disease that we don't see too often. The severe forms, as in Lonnie's hidradenitis, is usually very, very rare. It's really a clinical diagnosis. There's no laboratory test or pathology examination that can truly confirm it.
Today, 5 years since he was diagnosed, Lonnie continues to pursue his love of football as a successful sports writer. And despite random flare-ups, he's never given up hope for a cure.
He still struggles with boils continuing to develop and pain. He has a great attitude,
I've had to have reconstructive face surgery to get rid of all the scar tissue on the left side of my face and major reconstructive surgery done on my groin and thigh area. I'm very pleased with the result. You just have to have a positive attitude. I've dealt with this for over 2 decades, but I'm optimistic about my future.
And throughout it all, one person has never let Lonnie's disease affect her. Kimberly and Lonnie are now married.
Words can't really express how supportive Kimberly's been. She's been the rock that you need to have in a relationship. I just love her so much.
Going through this process has made us a stronger couple. We've grown closer, and we take very little for granted.
Kimberly and I have tried to stay active, and we go on daily walks. I'm still going to be productive, and being with my wife is still the most important thing. My pressure now is just try to live a happy, healthy life on a daily basis.
While there was no denying that Lonnie White had a disturbing skin condition, Theresa Ennis was forced to endure a series of bizarre symptoms only she could see. In the spring of 1993, 16-year-old Theresa Ennis walked into a Long Island diner with her friends, just for a burger and fries. She had no idea her future husband was about to join their group.
A mutual friend introduced us, and from the moment I met him, I knew that there was something special about him.
Initially, the first thing that struck me about her was her beautiful eyes. And after I got to know her, I just found out that she was just a great person inside.
We were all about just enjoying life to the fullest.
I decided to propose to Teresa on the beach, and I said, I want you always to be happy, and I want to be happy with you.
Dan and I got married in 2005, and we relocated to Lexington, Virginia.
I was working as an electrician's helper, and Teresa was working in real estate.
I loved my job. I loved meeting new people and visiting new properties.
Life was very good for the Rachlins. And in 2007, when the couple finds out Teresa's pregnant, they couldn't be happier.
I always dreamed of having a child.
Teresa felt that her life was coming together, and she was just so excited.
She sails through the pregnancy. But just weeks before her due date, Teresa experiences something very disturbing.
I was at work on my laptop, and I noticed these 2 spots that looked like 2 little flies on my screen buzzing around. And then they progressively got larger and larger, and it was shaking. I was terrified, and so I called Dan. I said, something's wrong with my vision.
And in minutes, Dan arrives at her office and rushes Teresa to the local hospital.
And while we were driving, I got this headache in the back of my head and my neck. I was getting really worked up by the minute. I was sweating, I was breathing fast. I was so close to delivering my first child.
I was very scared. She could possibly lose our baby.
Just 3 weeks away from delivering her first child, Theresa Rachlin suddenly begins experiencing bizarre visual distortions and a searing headache. Alarmed, her husband immediately rushes Teresa to the closest ER. The Rachlins are terrified that something may be wrong with their baby.
The doctor did a thorough exam, and he thought that it was pretty classic for an ocular migraine.
An ocular migraine is a temporary disturbance in vision that occurs when blood vessels suddenly constrict, reducing blood flow to the eye.
The doctor explained that an ocular migraine could occur at the end of pregnancy due to the fact that your estrogen level fluctuates, and they weren't very concerned about it.
I was very relieved that there was nothing wrong with the baby.
I was really happy. It was a temporary situation. My vision would return, and I didn't have anything to worry about. About 40 minutes after the start of this, I noticed my vision began to come back. The headache was gone. They told me to just go home and to not work for the rest of my pregnancy.
We went back home and everything seemed to go back to normal, so we were happy with that.
I just stayed at home and got ready for the baby to come.
Just after Christmas, right on schedule, Teresa goes into labor.
When Ashley was born, we counted 10 fingers and 10 toes, and we were just very happy that we had a healthy baby girl.
I was excited to bring her home and have a whole new life with our own little family. My vision was great, and I thought for sure, well, you know, I can put all this behind me and forget it ever happened. I went back to work when Ashley was 8 weeks old. It was pretty hard, but it was something that I really wanted to do. I loved it. Life really couldn't have been better.
Teresa settles into a comfortable routine as the next 8 months sail by. Then, one day in August, she's suddenly hit by a shocking new symptom.
I was at work. When I looked at my coworkers, it looked like I was looking at them through a kaleidoscope. I would see bits and pieces of their faces, like they would have one eye and one ear on the other side of their head. I called Dan and I said, you need to take me to the hospital because I'm losing my vision by the second. We didn't have an explanation now. I wasn't pregnant. This was not supposed to be happening.
I was very concerned at this point. I picked Teresa up and we rushed to the ER again.
The doctors took me in right away and examined me. I didn't know what was happening or what to expect.
The doctors explained to us that there could be a bigger problem, could be something with her brain, so I got very concerned.
The doctor thought, just to be thorough, to do a CT scan to just help rule out anything serious. I thought that there was a chance of having a brain tumor. I just thought, what else could really be causing this other than that? I was really terrified. The doctor came back with the results and he said that everything came back normal. I didn't have any brain tumors. He said some people just have a migraine condition, and once you develop it, you've always got a migraine condition. It was, well, maybe it'll happen again and maybe it won't, and good luck. I was really scared that I may have these forever just because I didn't know how I was going to live a normal life. I knew that I had to kind of ignore them and hope for the best.
Over the following 3 months, the strange visual disturbances seem to come and go at will, and Teresa gradually learns to live with them. She has no idea that the worst is yet to come.
I was driving from downtown to my house, and I realized that something was wrong with my eye. It just seemed like there was a gray line in my vision that was almost like an imprint from a camera flash. It was like a gray, transparent arch. All I knew was that I just wanted to get home.
When Teresa came in the door and told me what was happening, I was very concerned. So we called the doctor and made an emergency appointment to see him.
Dan drove me up to the eye doctor where I was dilated, and the eye doctor looked in and he said, yes, there's something there. It's a cotton wool spot. I'd never heard the term, and he said it's a retinal infarct.
A retinal infarct is an interruption of blood flow to the retina's nerve fibers, resulting in a partial or total loss of vision.
The doctor told me that it was like a little mini stroke that I had in my eye, which meant that there was a cutoff of blood flow to the rest of this little tiny vessel in my eye, and it leaves a marking that looks like cotton wool. The doctor told me that this shouldn't cause any permanent vision loss, but that it could take anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks to resolve itself. I was relieved.
But Teresa's relief is short-lived. The retinal infarct might be a sign of a serious underlying disorder.
The doctor said that cotton wool spots are most commonly found in people that have some sort of an autoimmune disease, and he believed that there was something that probably caused this systemically.
I was very concerned when he first spoke of an autoimmune disease because I know that they could be very dangerous.
The physician suspects Teresa has lupus, a serious inflammatory disease that can attack all the organs of the body.
The doctor ordered a workup of my blood.
The wait felt like forever.
I'm thinking, well, now do I have an autoimmune disease that's going to completely change my life? The thought was absolutely devastating to me. I was terrified.
Over the past year, Theresa Rachlin has been experiencing frightening distortions in her eyesight that no doctor can explain. But now, one expert suspects he knows what's triggering her bizarre symptoms. Lupus, an extremely debilitating and often fatal autoimmune disease.
I was scared. I wasn't sure how it was going to impact my life.
Finally, after 3 excruciating days, the findings are in.
When we went to the hematologist, he said that they didn't find anything wrong.
I was really happy to find out that all my blood work came back normal, but I was frustrated not still having an answer.
Over the next month, doctors lead Teresa through a series of specialized autoimmune tests. But everything they run comes up empty.
I didn't know what else to do. On a daily basis, I would have cotton wool spots in my vision. I thought a lot of Ashley because maybe I was sick with some sort of a disease and that I wouldn't be around for her.
Worried and confused, Teresa does the best she can to get through each day. Then, while at work in December, she's blindsided by a frightening new symptom.
I noticed that I got this strange sensation in my ears that was like a loud pitch noise that had just come out of nowhere. Everything started to feel weird. I developed dizziness that was strange. I felt like I was falling to the left, like I was on a boat.
We had no idea where this vertigo was coming from or the ringing in her ears. It was very, very upsetting.
Teresa returns home, hoping the dizziness and ringing sounds are just temporary. But over the next few weeks, the strange symptoms recur again and again.
It was a battle every day just to maintain a normal lifestyle. And there was this screaming in my ears. It made my head a crazy place. I felt completely alone.
Determined to get to the bottom of her puzzling situation, Teresa consults one doctor after another.
No one could give me answers. I started to question my sanity and thought, is this more in my head than reality?
There were eye doctors, retina doctors, rheumatologists, hematologists, you name it, she was going to them. I thought, won't anyone help my daughter? I thought a break would help her.
I left my job. I didn't know what each day held for me. And I just became afraid of everything.
Teresa was afraid to leave the house with Ashley because she didn't know if she was going to have another episode or partially go blind or lose her hearing. It was really hard for me at times.
The situation became really emotionally exhausting. He was getting really tired of trying to be the strong one all the time while I was completely falling apart. There were days that I would wish that he would just leave me so that he could go and have a good life.
It was very hard, but I married her for better or worse, in sickness and in health.
As bad as things are, Teresa can't imagine the terrifying turn her life is about to take.
It was a beautiful Sunday morning, and the sun came through all the blinds and blinded me for a minute. It looked like somebody had taken white paint to the top right part of my vision in my right eye. I started to really panic. The only thing I could think was, I'm going blind. I'm losing my vision, and I'm never going to see my child again. I was very scared, so I called the eye doctor right away. And he said, I would like for you to come in and see Dr. Tiedemann, who's our retina doctor. When I had arrived, my vision had improved, and we sat down, and he wanted to know exactly what all of my symptoms were.
And as a physician, One of my main goals is to tie together things that may not seem to be related, but often really are. I had been fortunate enough to see other patients who have had this constellation of symptoms.
He said, "I think I know what you have." And that was the most exciting words I ever heard in my life. I felt like I could become whole again, and it was the first hope that I've had in years.
Over the past 2 years, Theresa Rachlin has been suffering from inexplicable, highly disturbing vision loss and random bouts of vertigo that go hand in hand with a ringing in her ears. Now, Dr. James Tiedemann thinks he knows what's going on and has referred her to neurologist John Susac to confirm his hunch.
When I arrived to see Dr. Susac at his office, he performed a variety of eye tests.
In 1975, I discovered a disorder, and her symptoms fit entirely with that condition. Her symptoms led me to make the diagnosis of Susac Syndrome.
Susac Syndrome is an extremely rare disorder that affects the retina, ear, and in some cases, the brain. In healthy individuals, blood vessels transport blood and the oxygen it carries throughout the body. But in patients like Teresa, for some unknown reason, the immune system goes haywire. It attacks the walls of the blood vessels, causing inflammation and inhibiting blood flow.
And when these small blood vessels swell, there is not enough blood that gets to the brain, retina, and inner ear, and they cannot function normally.
I was very thankful to hear that there was a name behind what was actually happening to me.
While there's no medical explanation for why or when the disease strikes, it's clear that all of Teresa's symptoms stem from the blocked blood vessels, starting with her ocular migraines.
Ocular migraine seems to be caused by spasm of blood vessels. When the blood flow is interrupted, it's only a matter of a few seconds before the retina stops functioning. Vision loss is very nearly immediate.
And as Teresa's disease progressed, more and more tiny blood vessels in her eyes were affected.
Each part of the retina has a blood flow that is uniquely served by just one branch of an artery. And when a tiny branch of the artery is blocked, it's a tiny defect in vision in the area that's served by that blood vessel.
Eventually, the blood vessels leading to Teresa's inner ears became constricted too, causing vertigo and ringing sounds.
He explained that the fine vessels that bring the blood to my ears would spontaneously close up and cut off the blood flow.
Susac syndrome can have a very wide range of severity. It can be very disabling, and it can cause complete hearing loss, profound vision loss, and other symptoms within the brain.
But while the doctors are confident that Teresa has a mild form of the disease, she's not out of the woods yet.
We ordered an MRI in Teresa because in many of these patients, even though they have the limited form of the disease, they can have abnormalities in the corpus callosum, a certain portion of the brain.
Teresa thought that she was going to die. She was afraid that she could be bleeding in her brain.
I just dreaded waiting for the results. I was scared that something was going to happen to me and that I wasn't going to be around to raise my daughter.
If Teresa had something wrong with her brain from this illness, I thought she would not live very long. And it scared me to death.
When Dr. Susac told me that my MRI was normal, it was just a huge relief.
Monitoring Teresa in the future will help guide us in terms of what might be the most helpful to her if there are changes in her condition.
It's clear now that for both medical and psychological reasons, Teresa is extremely lucky to have landed a diagnosis when she did.
If I went undiagnosed, I'm not quite sure what would have happened to me. It was such a huge relief to know that I actually had something. All my symptoms were very real.
We still had questions about the future and what it was going to bring.
While there is no cure for Susac syndrome, there is treatment available. For Teresa, we recommended steroids, an immunosuppressant, and IVIG.
But the treatments can be risky. Steroids can lead to osteoporosis, and immunosuppressants leave the body defenseless against infection.
I was concerned with the treatment because I was worried that the side effects would be actually worse than the symptoms she was having.
I chose not to start the treatment yet. If my symptoms get worse, then I will start the treatment.
The good news is, for reasons doctors don't understand, after 8 to 10 years, patients with the syndrome often spontaneously go into remission.
He said that I had a really good prognosis, and he feels there's a chance that I could be in remission without any sort of treatment.
With a solid diagnosis finally in hand, Dan and Teresa can't help but wonder why so many doctors failed to put the pieces of the puzzle together.
Susac syndrome is very rare. There's no laboratory test that you can draw to get a diagnosis. There have now been well over 200 cases of Susac syndrome reported in the world's literature, and that only represents the tip of the iceberg.
Today, almost 2.5 years since the disease set in, Teresa is meeting the challenges of her condition with new confidence and peace of mind.
Teresa still struggles with her disease, but she's able to handle it a lot better. Her attitude has changed a lot. She's become a lot more positive. She's a lot more outgoing.
I am definitely more independent than I've been in years now. I'm starting to go out with my daughter and do things that I have never done with her, and my husband and I are very, very strong.
We're a lot more active now. We take Ashley to the park as often as we can, and we do just whatever we can to get out and be a happy family.
I used to take my vision for granted. I didn't know any better, and now there isn't one day or moment that I take my vision for granted, and I'm so thankful every day that I can see my daughter.
Oh, come on.